So all the time I'm talking, I'm going to be on that thing.
Yeah, it's recording now. Okay, what's your name?
You want my maiden name?
No one at all. Full
One.
name.
Okay, my full name is Betty Joan Lawson.
Okay, and where were you born?
I was born in Yukon, West Virginia, May the 15th, 1927.
And how did your parents meet? Describe your parents.
Well, my mother was 16 years old. She lived in a coal camp, Appalachia, West Virginia. My daddy was a painter. He was painting the company houses, and that's how they met.
And do you remember your mom or dad having a high school education?
No, my mother finished the 7th grade, and I really don't know how far my father went. He didn't get no further than the 7th grade himself, I don't think. But at the time, my mother didn't have any way to get to the high school. She graduated through the 7th grade, and they had no school buses, and the next school was several miles away, so she had no way to go to school to finish her education. And so at the age of 16, she got married. Yeah.
And she loved to read, right?
Yeah, she loved to read, and up until the day she died, almost, she read about every day.
And how long did she live?
She was 98 when she died. Yeah. She loved to read. She would have made a good school teacher. She would have made a good school teacher. Yeah.
So her mother was a matriarch of the family there in the West Virginia mountains. What was her name?
My grandmother, her name was Martha Ann Cook, and she married Adams. Yeah.
What do you know about her schooling?
I don't know that much about. I never heard my grandmother mention school. But she was smart and she could read and write, so I know she's bound to have some schooling, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but she never really talked too much about, you know, because I think my grandmother was about 22 when she got married. Yeah, and my grandfather the same age. I think they were both about 22 when they got married. Yeah.
Did your grandma have a trade that she did, or was she mainly a housekeeper?
Well, she was a good cook, and she cooked a lot for the men that worked on the railroad. They got her, and she run a boarding house there in Appalachia, and she cooked, and a lot of the people that worked the railroad came there and had their meals with her. And they really wanted her to travel the road and do the cooking for the railroad. Which
Like
she
on a car, like on a rail car kitchen?
Yeah. But then she got pregnant and had to give up that job. But yeah, my grandmother was a #1 cook.
And how many children did she have?
She had 7 living and 2 dead. 2 died when they was just, babies. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that's 9
Yeah.
children in all.
Uh-huh.
It's a big family. And so I've heard you mention a story that she actually rode in on the first motor car that came through Yukon or
yeah.
Appalachia.
Uh-huh. Yeah, she did. And I think one of her sons, her oldest son, bought the car. Took her for a ride. Yeah, so I don't think she was all that crazy about the first ride she took. The way she talked, she wasn't that crazy about it.
So how did she get around from place to place? What was her transportation?
Well, they caught a train. They rode a train everywhere. Because back in them days, early days, there wasn't a bus route or anything. So you easily rode a horse or you rode a train. And so if they ever had to go to town, they rode the train there and back. Yeah.
What was the closest town, the larger town that they would go to shop and?
The closest town was Mullins, West Virginia, which was about, by car now, about a half-hour drive from Appalachia. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, up until just a few years ago, that didn't have a car would catch the passenger train and ride to Mullins, and then they'd catch a train back home, there to Appalachia. Yeah. At least they was doing that not too many years ago. Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember any of her like politics and what she felt about life and living in the United States during the 1920s and 1930s and?
Well, I know she was a Republican, and she helped to organize the first women to vote in Wyoming County when voting became good for women to vote. She helped to organize the group in Wyoming County.
So, do you think we could consider her a suffragette?
I would say so, because she helped to get it organized and all there in Wyoming County, and then she and some of the other women went to the capital of West Virginia for some kind of a meeting they had for all the women.
Convention?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is cool. Okay, so just to clarify, she, at that time in the 1920s, the Republican Party was still kind of like the Lincoln's Party, that split off from like the Southern Democrats when West Virginia became part of the Union instead of seceding with the South during the Civil War. Okay, so let's see. Next up, let's continue to talk about your father and what he did before you were born. I think that he was in World War I.
Yes, he was in World War I, and he was shipped overseas, and so he fought over in Germany. Yeah, he was over in France. Yes.
And he was a private, so it's safe to say that he was in the trenches during that time.
Oh, yeah. But he was also a good cook, and so he ended up, instead of having to fight in the trenches, he cooked for some of the colonels and the higher-ups when they found out that my daddy was such a good cook. That became his job.
Where do you think he learned how to cook? Being a man, of that age, that seems to be
I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know if he grew up and had to do some cooking on his own on the farm. I really don't know. But he was a good cook. And after the colonels and them found out what a good cook he was, well, they wanted him for their cook instead of him being in the trenches.
So he wasn't actually from West Virginia. He was from Virginia. Can you tell us a little bit about like his where he's born? Just a little bit about his experience as a kid.
Well, his people owned the farms, and he was born in Tazewell County, Virginia. All his kin people were farmers. They had big farms in Tazewell. Yeah. I never met his father or his mother. They died. Well, his mother died right after him and Mom were married.
And how old was he when he married your
My
mom?
dad was 31. My mom was 16. Dad was 31 when they got married. Yeah.
You had mentioned that he was actually a year older or a year younger than what.
Yeah, they always
thought-
thought Dad was 32. But when they sent and got his birth certificate, he wasn't but 31. Yeah. But they always thought he was a year older than what he was. Yeah.
So they must have started going out courting back in those days, right after he got back from the war.
Probably because when they met, my dad was a painter. He was painting all the company houses there in Appalachia where my mother lived. And that's where she met my dad. He was painting all the coal company houses. Yes.
And then later on, after the painting, what did he do for trade? Did y'all move around any?
He was a coal miner. After he quit, painting, then he started working in the coal mines. And that's what he done the rest of his life. Until he retired, he worked in the coal mines. Yeah.
What, when you were born, where were you, and then how many places did you move around in the different coal camps?
Well, when I was born, we lived at Yukon, West Virginia. From there, we moved to Keene Mountain, Virginia, which was next to Grundy. From there, we moved to Oceana, and that's where my mom lived until she died. That was the last place we lived as a family, was at Oceana. So that wasn't too many times we moved in my lifetime.
And I understand that your father didn't stay just a coal miner, that he was in like a supervisor role.
Yes, he was what they called a section boss, which nowadays they call it a supervisor. But in the coal mines, they are laid off like in rooms on different sides of the mine, and they're called sections. And so he was a section boss over some of the sections in the coal mine. And he was also the one that blasted the dynamite all the time. When they would be opening up a new seam of coal, they would use dynamite to blow away the rock and the dirt, whatever. They always had my dad to do that because they said he knew exactly how to do it. Daddy didn't tear up so much of the mountains or whatever. So when they opened up a new seam of coal, he was the one that would blast it open.
And we were talking about the probability of him knowing that trade from his experience in World War I.
Probably so. I figured that's where he learned the trade because he was good at it. So I would say that's what he did. That might have been how they made the trenches. I don't know. Might have blasted the holes in the ground.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I get you any water?
Huh?
Can I get you some water? Are you good?
No, not right now. I'll have to have some pretty soon.
Okay. Okay, so you were born in 1927.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can you tell us your earliest memory?
About the earliest memory I really have, and I guess maybe I might have been 3 or 4, was going out to the company store and being able to get a cone of ice cream.
Do you remember what flavor?
Well, most of the time back then they had cones that had 3 holes in it, and I always got chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. Yeah.
Classic.
I know my mother said, and back then, well, they have it like they still do now. All 4 of them on a counter, they dip down in there, get the ice cream. And Mama said, I guess I was about 3 or 4, or maybe 3 by then. And this man that run the store, he'd let me lay up on that counter. He would take the lids off of them ice creams and let me take my finger. My mother got on him about it one day when she went out there and I had my finger down in all the different ice cream. Mama got on the man. He said, well, she just got a little finger. Said she's not bothering all that ice cream. Oh, Lord, no wonder I'm like I am.
You get it your way, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Lord.
I remember you mentioning your doll when you had when you were small, and I think maybe your siblings also had toys. Can you tell us a little bit about those toys? And how many siblings did you have?
Well, I had, there was 5 of us children. There was 3 of us girls, and I had 2 brothers. And one of the dolls that I gave was just a big old baby doll. I still have that doll to this day. So she's 80-some years old. And back then we got dolls made out of, back then they call it celluloid. That'd be like about like a thin plastic nowadays, maybe. And I remember Mom, when they went to town, brought me back one. And I said, oh, it feels so cold. And I held it up over the stove to get it warm, and it started to melt. And I think I said it was out of celluloid or something like that. But, you know,
that's
I was
so
warming
sweet.
her up and I was a melting her. Oh, gosh. Well, I don't know whatever happened to that doll. Probably had melted legs on it somewhere or another. Oh, good gracious.
And then it seems to me I remember you saying that you had a something with a blue dress. Do you remember that?
Well, you know about all the dolls back in those days either had a blue dress or a pink dress. I always picked out the ones with the blue dress, and Mary Lou got the dolls with the pink dress. That was my favorite color, I believe, was blue back in them days. So the dolls would be the same, only just have a different color dress on.
Mm-hmm.
I always picked the one with the blue.
Were their hair different colors or the same color?
Now, back in those days, most of the hair was a painted-on hair. Yeah. We hardly ever got a doll back in my young days as having hair. They always have a painted head on, you know, painted hair. Yeah.
So back in the coal camps, can you explain like how that system works? Like how did y'all get your food and supplies and stuff like that?
Well, in most all the coal camps, there was a company store. And that's where we got all of our groceries. They also sold material and stuff, and Mom would buy material and make us girls our dresses. I don't remember ever, as a young, small child, ever getting a dress from a store. I don't know. I guess they had them at the company store. I don't know. But Mother made all of our clothes up till I was a pretty good-sized girl. Because she could make all 3 of us a dress cheaper than she could buy one of us a dress. So I really didn't get a dress until, I don't know, a store-bought dress till I was about 10 years old, I guess. Yeah.
What about the kind of money that you had back in those days? Did you have like dollar bills like we'd have today back in the coal camps?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes, but if you wanted money before your payday, you went to the store, to the office in the store, and you drawed out script. And it would be round metal, like metal money. Some of it would be $1, some would be 50-cent pieces. So you would go draw script out. And a lot of time, by the time payday came for the miners, they had done drawed out enough script that they didn't draw very much money. Because they would go to the store every day and get $1 script or whatever. And that was deducted from their payday. Yeah.
So what did people do as young people and teenagers and families do for fun in the coal camps? Was there a lot of music or movies, or do you remember any of that culture? Drinking?
Oh, yeah, they was all the time drinking, moonshine, bootlegging, whatever. But they were movies, but they were usually, we lived at Yukon, and there was a movie house in the town of War. And my dad always had a car, so my aunt and her husband, they would drive the car and go to War to the movies. And if they was playing the Shirley Temple movies, they would take us girls to watch that. And but other than that, there wasn't nothing in the coal camp there at Yukon to do. So most times if you didn't have a car, then I don't guess you got to go to the movies anywhere. But they was usually, sometimes they'd be a family move in the coal camp, and maybe somebody in the family would play the guitar, or that back then they had a lot of what they called auto harps, you know. And sometimes somebody in the family would play that, and they'd come out on the porch and they would play, and everybody would gang around. Yeah, to listen to it, yeah. Because I always loved music myself.
Where did you learn how to sing?
Well,
In church?
No, we didn't go to church. Growing up, there was no church house where I grew up in Yukon. Once in a while, they would preacher come in and hold like a revival at the schoolhouse. Maybe every 2 or 3 years or something. But there was no church there at Yukon.
No, like Sunday church. Do you remember circuit rider preachers coming through the coal camp? Any snake handlers?
No, not where, not there at Yukon. But when we moved to King Mountain, Virginia, they had a little church house there, and they had a preacher and his wife. Oh, and so we went to church and Sunday school there. But there at Yukon, they didn't have a church house or anything.
So did you learn religion and Christianity just from people talking or reading the Bible, or how'd you learn all the?
Well, once in a while, sometimes they would be preachers coming around, and they would hold a revival in the schoolhouse once every 2 or 3 years or something. But I don't know, there's usually always a preacher coming through, and he would stop at different houses and talk to the people.
Did your mom and dad talk about religion a lot?
No, my mom and dad didn't. Not unless my Granny Adams was a visiting there. Yeah, and then she would, talk about the Bible stuff. Yeah. But until we moved to Oceana, they several churches down there. And so that's when we really started going to church a lot, was when we moved to Oceana. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the time period. You were born during Prohibition.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any stories to tell about Prohibition in that era?
Oh, that's when you wasn't allowed to have alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I know one time they got it started there in the coal camp that there was going to be police or whoever coming around checking everybody's house to make sure they didn't have any alcohol or whiskey.
Revenuers.
Yeah. And I remember my dad, he had about, I'd say, about a little half a pint bottle or a pint of whiskey. Could have been bootleg, I don't know. And anyway, they got started. They was going to start checking everything. So Mama got the bottle of whiskey, and she stuck it down about halfway down the flour that was in the cabinet that you sifted to make your bread. She put that bottle of whiskey about halfway down that big old tin of flour, and then she shut the door on the cabinet, you know. But nobody never did come around to checking. So, so I guess after that she probably got the whiskey out of her flour bin. But I remember when that was going on, everybody got scared. They was hiding their whiskey. So Mama put that, and then she put it halfway down in there. That was back when you had 25 bags of flour in those cabinets. And she put it about halfway down in there. Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I remember that well because we was all scared. I don't know what I thought they'd do to us, but I guess I thought they'd throw us all in jail. I don't know. But yeah, I remember them days, yep.
So the radio started to be popular as well. Did you guys have a radio?
Oh yeah, we always had a radio. Yeah, sometimes there'd be a lot of static on it. You couldn't hardly hear anything. I know back when we would try on Saturday night to listen to Grand Ole Opry. Some nights we've got it good. And then some Saturday nights it'd be so much static on it that it really wasn't worth listening to it, but me and my daddy, we still listened to it through all that there static and stuff. Because he loved music like I did. Everybody else would be in the bed asleep, me and my daddy'd be sitting there listening to the Grand Ole Opry.
Do you remember what performers came on?
Oh, sure I do. Uncle Dave Macon was on there. That little colored boy that played the harmonica, D. Fort Bailey, was on. Carter family was on a few years later. They was on. The Delmore brothers were on. And they had this year group that danced. And they were still dancing not a few many years ago called the Fruit Jar Drinkers. Yeah, so I mean, they had all kinds of bands with all kinds of names.
Flat and Scruggs.
Oh yeah, they came back. They was on a little later.
Yeah, I think they were way later.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the Delmore brothers, they were good. They could good harmony singers. Yeah, they were good. But yeah, a lot of them back in them days were good. Yeah.
Any last comments about the first decade that you were alive? Any other memories or antics, anecdotes?
No, can't think of.
Was life back then like life is now?
Oh no. I think life was more simpler back then. You didn't have as much stuff to worry about like nowadays, you know. I mean, back then there were still things to worry about. A lot of times work wasn't very good, and you still had to pay rent, you still had to buy groceries. And a lot of times if you had a very big family, one of the children would be sick. But we always lived where there was a company doctor. But they was always things, to worry about. But there was not so much stuff to get into. You didn't have as much like people do nowadays. Your only entertainment, if you didn't play music, was the radio. There was no television, nothing on that order. And a lot of people couldn't afford to go to the movies. Even though it didn't cost but a nickel to get in for children. But still, a lot of people couldn't come up with a nickel. Not in those days. Yeah, I think back when I was going to see the Shirley Temple movies when I was a little girl, I think our tickets for us children was 5 cents to get in to see her. And most of the time when her movies would come into, and they always came into war in, the small like town, we always got to go see her movies, if at all possible. So I got to see right many Shirley Temple movies back when she was a kid, about like I was a kid back in them days.
Probably about the same age.
Yeah, probably so. But she was good. And in the movie there was a colored man, and I don't know what she called him, but he tap danced, and her and him would tap dance a lot in her movies. Yeah, she was a good little dancer, and she could sing. She was a good child actor. Outside of being a beautiful child, that head of hair. Yeah, but she was good. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, right offhand, I don't know. Is there anything you want to ask me?
I don't think that there's. I think I've thought of everything I could.
You think I've told you everything there are to tell then, huh?
For that chapter.